so I had forgotten until yesterday, because I don't hear this story very often, that my grandmother Burns, who was born around 1903 or 4, when she was about 6 years old, around 1910, they got in the covered wagon and headed out to Colorado to Homestead. They didn't stay. They came back to Iowa. But she did, I can say, my grandmother went to Colorado in a covered wagon to go to a homestead. She came back and she married Elmer Burns. And that was in 1923 down in southern Iowa. And they immediately set about having children. And they did not stop having children until 1948. And so there were 11 of them. My mom is number 10 of those 11 kids. And as a consequence, I have somewhere around 65 first cousins. And once you pass that, names are impossible. But we get together a couple of times a year, always around the 4th of July. We have a family reunion, and then at Christmas, we get together as well, down at my Aunt Arda's house in Ottumwa. And of course, when you get together, it's time to talk. And you tell stories to each other, and you hear about the stupid things that your aunts and uncles did when they were little. Because, you know, most of you who are over a certain age have no good reason why you should still be alive. Because you did a lot of stupid things when you were children. Grandma Burns, my aunts and uncles say, yeah, one time the little girls and a couple of the boys were outside, and Grandma Burns looked out the kitchen window, and they were playing Tea Party. And one of the boys looked really green. She came outside and she said, what are you guys doing? Well, we're playing Tea Party. And they picked up the teapot and she sniffed it and went, all the tea in the pot had come straight out of the gas tank for the tractor. And they didn't have a car, and so Grandma had to move up the fella and jump up on the tractor and drive across to the next farm where there was a car so they could get in to see the doctor. And then a couple years later, the boys had been reading too many Mike Fink stories about life on the Mississippi River and their incredible marksmanship. And so it caused another mad rush out of the back door from the kitchen when the boys started shooting tin cans off each other's heads with the .22. Oh. So they were full of these kind of stupid things. And Burns's, my aunts and uncles, are built along two lines. Either they're short and round, or they're short and very skinny. Michael Delbert is short and skinny. He's a wiry guy. And one of his stories that I particularly like a lot, that you might hear at Thanksgiving or Christmas, they're big hunters. Love to go hunting. So they've always got a good hunting story, which is always true. Everything in it happened. And during the 30s and 40s, they moved from farm to farm to farm a lot. But during the 30s and 40s, they stayed for a while at a farm in southern Iowa called Sedan. And if you here in Nebraska, a 1,000-acre farm is, well, you know, that's a little place. For us in Iowa, a 1,000-acre farm is huge. And it had been a cattle ranch. The Sedan River flowed through it. There were a couple of great big ponds that were big enough to be small lakes. There were some immense barns. And the thing that made Sedan ideal was that there had been ranch hands, which meant they needed houses. And all along the lane at the front of the farm was a little row of houses. And so there was a house for Grandma and Grandpa. There was a house for the girls. There was a house for the boys. It was the first time since they'd had those 11 kids that there was room for everybody. And so they all settled in there. And Delbert would say that when they lived at Sedan, one day he'd say, well, me and the boys, we wanted to go up and do some swimming because it was a hot afternoon, so we headed up to one of the lakes. And when we got up there, there was this flock of about 80 or 90 ducks on the lake. And I thought, shoot, those would be nice. And I didn't have my gun with me. So I looked over and there were some old plow lines laying on the fence. Okay. So I took off all my clothes and I grabbed the plow lines and I got in the water and I swam up underneath the ducks and I tied all their legs together. and I grabbed the lines and I come up out of the water, and as I come up, I think I must have scared them because they took off all at once. And all of a sudden I went, ah! And before I knew it, I was 50 feet up in the air, dripping wet and naked. You know those stupid ducks flew all that evening and all night long? And all about sunup the next morning, they lit down on a pond. I had no idea where I was. So I headed out, and I finally see this cabin. And so I got behind a bush and I called out, hey, anybody home? And this old guy comes out and says, yeah, I'm here. You alone? Yeah, I'm batching it. Good. I come up from behind the bush and say, you got any clothes? Well, he brought me a pair of overalls. It was way too big for me, but that was all right. And I said, where am I anyway? Well, you're right here. Oh, well, where's here? Oh, Rutledge, Missouri. Stupid ducks have flown me all the way to Missouri. Well, while I'm here, how's the hunting around here? Oh, it's pretty good. And the old man started telling me a bunch of stuff. There wasn't a lick of truth in it, I can tell you that. But the upshot was, we decided to go hunt. So he goes in and he takes down this great big muzzle-loading double-barrel shotgun off the wall. And he put a double charge of powder in each barrel. He didn't tell me that. He gave me the gun. And we headed down toward the river. And we get there. And there's a beautiful bunch of ducks up there on the river. And I think, ah, this will be great. And then I hear this noise down behind me. There was a bunch of geese. Oh man, ducks, geese. Why not both? So I start bending the barrels apart. And I'm just getting ready to shoot when down on the other side of the river comes this beautiful 14-point buck. And I thought, oh no! And I sort of bend the barrels back. And right at that moment, out of the water in front of me comes this cottonmouth rattlesnake. And it scared me so bad, I jumped back, I pulled on both barrels. And the kick from those double charges knocked me straight in the river. And I jumped up and shook my head, and I looked up and I managed to hit some of the ducks. So I'm grabbing them, and I look below me, and the old man's jumped in the river because I hit some of the geese too. So I'm coming up with this big armload of ducks, and the legs of these overalls are just swimming. And I get up on the bank, and I shook one, and about 15 bass fell out of that leg. And then I shook the other one, about 20 trout fell out. And as I'm setting down the ducks, one of the straps on my overalls came loose, and it shot right off and whacked a rabbit straight between the eyes. And I finally got the gun back. Oh, the ramrod had gone straight down the mouth of the rattlesnake, too. I bent the barrels back, and I'm getting ready to shoot the deer, and the hammers are gone. I look across the river, the hammers have gone straight across the river and had that deer penned in. And by the time we were all done, we had 17 ducks, 23 geese, 15 trout, 20 bass, a rattlesnake, the rabbit, and the 14-point buck. The old man says, well, you need to stay here and go hunting with me. And I said, oh, fair days hunting. You come up to Iowa, we'll show you how we really do it there. He really wanted me to stay, but I had to get back home and get to work. So I got my ducks turned back around the right direction, and we headed off. And I landed them back on the pond at Seadam. And I figured I'd keep them in place, so I tied them up to a tree. And I tell you, after 3 or 4 weeks of being tied like that, they got good and fat. And we boys, we got our girlfriends, and we headed up to the pond for a big roast duck picnic. And that's Uncle Delbert's story about a fair days hunt. So that's his story. Now, like I said, they moved around a lot. And as the kids got older, my mom, her oldest sister, Winona, is older than my dad's parents. So my mom had sisters who had grandchildren, and she was the one who ended up babysitting most of them. And she said every night at the house, because there were all these kids, and then they had boyfriends and girlfriends, and husbands and wives and kids, she said, well, there wasn't usually a night of the week where there weren't at least 20 people at dinner. And my Grandma Burns worked nights. And so, as a general rule, it fell to my mom and my Aunt Loretta and my Aunt Arda to do most of the cooking. My mom can't cook small. She can't cook for less than a big crowd. It doesn't work. My dad's side of the family is very small. It's just my dad and his brother, my Uncle Nick. And my Uncle Nick, because my dad spent so much time with my mom, well, he ended up hanging around with my mom's little sister, Loretta, so they just got married. So that keeps the family very close. On my dad's side, we're Crows, and I have relations all over southern Iowa, but I don't know them, because my grandparents didn't get along with the Crows. And so we'd be walking on the square in Bloomfield, and my grandma would say, that's your cousin over there. We didn't talk to him, not at all. Or the Stevenses, that's on another one, they'd say, hey Darrin, we're all going out to Mars Hill Cemetery to go mushroom hunting, do you want to come? No, I don't want to go mushroom hunting in the cemetery. You people are weird. I didn't like them very much. But on my mom's side, I had a lot of fun with my uncles because they were funny. And my Uncle Kendall, he was kind of the smart one. And he told a story when they lived at Farson. They had a little place that had a creek going through it, and they had some new land they had to clear. And he said, well, we worked all spring clearing this new ground. And there was hundreds of miles of wild grapevines to pull, and endless blackberry vines, and the locust trees to cut down, and rocks. It was awful. And finally we got it all cleared off and we're ready to plant. So we was all sitting up on the back steps of the house before sunup one morning shelling corn so we could start planting. And Grandma rang the dinner bell, and if you don't run fast, you aren't going to get any breakfast with all those kids. So I dropped my ear of corn and run inside. And as I come back out, well, I dropped my ear of corn in a bucket of water. And I reached in and picked it up. And one of those kernels of corn had swelled up to about the size of my thumb. I thought, well, that's odd. I popped it off and I stuck it in my pocket for later, and we headed down to start planting. After a couple hours of planting, I felt something in my pocket. I reached in. That kernel of corn had swelled up like a baseball. Well, I'm going to plant this. So I went over to a corner of the field and I stuck it in the ground, tamped it down, and I headed away, and about 10 seconds later I hear, "Pah!" Like a shotgun. I tried that thing, it sprouted. It was 20 feet tall by the time I got back to it. I thought, shoot, this thing's going to suck all the good out of the field. I got to get rid of it. So I grabbed an axe and I started chopping. But every time I hit, well, the cut mark was already 4 feet away. There wasn't much to do. We boys just stood there and watched it grow. For about an hour. It was already almost too tall to see. So we finished up planting the field and headed up for supper. That night, Sam Wainwright came over. He is looking for one of his mares that had gotten loose. And I said, Sam, how'd you get here? Did you ride or did you walk? He said, no, I rode my other horse. Oh, where's your horse? Oh, I tied up that sapling down in your new field. We headed down. When we got to the cornstalk, it was there, but there was no horse. So Raymond went and got a light, and he shone it up there, and oh yeah. There's Sam Wainwright's horse 70 feet up in the air. Raymond was a good shot, so he got the rifle and shot the bridle off the horse. It come down and made it fine. That thing grew all summer long. There was no way you were going to see the top of it. When the rest of the field tasseled out, it slowed down. It didn't grow more than 30 or 40 feet a day after that. But finally, everything was ready to come. We went through, we picked all the corn, we cut the stalks. The last thing left was that tall corn stalk. Now, well, the first ear was about 100 feet up in the air. And then you could see them really regular like after that. We better get out the crosscut saws and the axes, and we went into town with the stalk. We got it cut through, and we started to watch it fall. We watched it fall for 2 or 3 hours. And it was time for supper, so we headed on up. And long about midnight, once we were in bed, all of a sudden we were... Oh, the cornstalk must have hit the ground. When we got up in the morning, that thing was spread out across the fields just as far as the eye could see. It had landed right across the main road into Oskaloosa, and there was Model Ts backed up for miles on both sides of it. We thought, we got to get out there before somebody gets all our corn. And Robert, he had a Model T pickup with a flatbed trailer. So we got in the truck and we headed out and we got to the first ear of corn and went, oh my word. It was about 40 feet long, about 10 feet tall. We got big poles and peavies and we rolled it up onto the flatbed and we thought, my word, if we get all these back to the farm, they're never going to fit in the barn. So we found a circus that was going off for the winter and we rented their tents. And we covered the ears of corn with those tents. And we got them all pulled in, except the very last one, which had gone straight down in the mud in a newly plowed field. We looked around it and thought, how are we going to get that out of the ground? And Charlotte's husband, David, he was kind of brainy. He said, well, if you get some spikes driven into it and put chains on it, bring it up around and attach the T, maybe you can pull it out. So that's what we did. And we got it all hitched up to the team, and the team pulled. No dice. It wasn't going anywhere. So we got Sam Wainwright's team as well, and we put both teams on it. No, not a thing. So we got Grandma Lauer's team, and we put them on it. And when the 3 teams of horses finally... Cow! Up come the corn cob. All the kernels stayed in the ground. Perfectly rocked in well about 40